Welcome to Better Together, a Vaishnava family podcast.
A podcast where we explore family life from a Bhakti Yoga perspective. We are your hosts. I'm Aksh.
And I'm Gopika. Welcome to episode 9. The Difference Moment, Identity Integration as a Second Generation Hare Krishna. You know, our son is really into touring houses, and we have a really lovely neighbor who was out in her garden, and Kishore goes up to our neighbor and says, "Can I go into your garage? I want to see your house." And of course, our lovely neighbor says, "Sure." And then Kishore says, "I want to go inside your house." The neighbor says, "Sure." And so we ended up taking a tour of our neighbor's house, and she so graciously accommodated us and took him around and showed us her basement and let him open all the closets and flick all the switches, and it was great. When we were downstairs, though, after we had toured the house, Kishore stopped for a second, and then he goes, "Where's your temple room?" And our neighbors were like, "We don't have a temple room." And he was like, didn't really say anything, but it got me thinking that up until this point, many people in our close circle, our family members, our friends, all are practicing bhakti yogis and have some sort of space for worship within their home. Mm-hmm. And so for him, this might have been really the first house that he's been to where there wasn't a temple room. Mm. And I was just thinking about how, like, right now, Kishore is in our safe little bubble. Perhaps it hasn't dawned upon him, this idea that we're different. But one day, it's gonna sink in for him that he is different than the dominant culture, right? And, you know, that different moment, it could have a profound impact on the trajectory of one's faith journey, depending on how it goes and how it's processed. So it got me just thinking about my own journey and how we're going to parent our two little ones as they also have their own different moments. Mm-hmm. Do you remember your difference moment? The first time you felt or realized you were different?
Yeah, the earliest memory that I have is this camp that I went to called Camp Bernie. And it was like an off-site school trip where all these kids, we went off to some kind of mountain retreat for, I want to say, like 3 to 4 days, but it felt like forever.
Yeah.
And why I remember it is because I really struggled with eating. Mm. First of all, I've been used to having home lunches.
Yeah.
Right? And when you're gone for that many days, like, you can't take something from home. So I had to eat what was there, and I would, be standing in the line and getting my tray and not really sure what to eat, and nervousness of even asking, like, what's in this and what's in that. And then honestly, I basically just like ate cereal, peanut butter, jelly sandwich, and like salad for like 4 days straight. I just remember feeling like no one else is going through this. There's like nothing here for me to eat. So
it probably made you feel like your life sucked.
No.
In that moment. I mean, I'm just guessing, but
yeah, it was like a disadvantage that I was in, right? Of course, it affected how I felt. I had headaches. I couldn't sleep. Like, it just affected who I was. And I'm just this like 8 to 10-year-old boy.
Yeah. It's so funny that your difference moment was around food, because I think my difference moment was also around food. Maybe my name also, but I know that in kindergarten, they used to celebrate birthdays, and my parents had trained me to read the ingredients on every box of treats, on cupcakes. They had, taught me that I'm to always ask, does this have eggs? So every single birthday, I would be the kid that went up while everybody else was just eating cake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kids noticed my diet because vegetarian wasn't a thing. I had this moment in 3rd grade where literally the entire class at one point before Thanksgiving was kind of ganging up on me about what I was going to eat on Thanksgiving. It was like, so you're not going to eat turkey? You're not going to eat any meat? You're not going to eat this? How can you not? And okay, I'm 8 years old, right? Like there's 20 kids around me confronting me about what I am going to do and what I'm not going to do. But yeah, I have to say, I think, yeah, my difference moment was also negative in that sense. Like I felt being different was a disadvantage. It was only going to cause me pain and suffering. I feel sad talking about this.
Yeah.
It kind of like brings up for me this question for you. As parents now, do we protect our children from these things as much as possible? Do we loosen up rules so that they don't have to like experience the pain of this as a child, right? Like some people might argue, forget about the eggs and the onion garlic. Or is it important as parents to let our kids really go out there in the world and experience those hard moments of difference the way that we did? Because those were important in some ways to our journey, right? What do you think?
For me, I think that if one has like a spiritual practice, one has some type of cultural connection that is not necessarily mainstream, you have to figure out a way to own that as a superpower.
Yeah.
And so I would actually say that loosening it too much where they don't get the experience of working through the difficulty of learning how to own it is not good for them long term.
Yeah.
Right. Not that I don't want my child to suffer in the same way, but I do want it to be an opportunity for them to work through it, to work with it.
Yeah.
To explore how can I articulate this or share it with others.
Yeah.
I feel like that's essential part of growth.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, although I feel like younger kids cognitively may not necessarily have the total capacity to be able to talk about it in terms of why we do it.
Yeah.
I mean, the capacity is limited, right?
Yeah.
So that's the debate. And on one hand, do you protect them by just isolating them from these social events where you know they might encounter these things? Or do you go, but just hold your rules and allow them to feel disappointed? Or is there some middle ground? So let's just put a disclaimer that every family is going to feel differently. Every child is going to be different and have different temperaments. And so all of these decisions are incredibly unique to each family. So we are just talking about this for us. We are not prescribing the right thing to do or what we believe is right for the world. But I feel like for me, if I were to loosen standards, how would I then tighten them later down the road?
Right.
I think it's valid that if a child is too young, then processing disappointment could be more detrimental than beneficial with regards to faith development. Right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's like bringing our own treat or bringing our own cake or sending something that our kid can enjoy that is accommodated. Just like if a child has an allergy to something, right? A lot of times we make sure that that child can still enjoy something. Kind of feel the same way. But yeah, I appreciate your point about as a family, these are our standards. And if we're going to be in that situation, perhaps when our kids are able to have that conversation, talking about it ahead of time, discussing it and discussing why we do what we do and allowing them to have feelings about it and brainstorming solutions and making sure our intention is not for them to be miserable or to suffer or to feel punished or to feel disadvantaged. And why actually our standards make us feel empowered, even though it might be hard. I feel like that's what would feel important for me. So, like, I wanted to ask you about this difference moment, kind of going back to what we were talking about, only because I feel like many second generation youth end up talking about this phenomenon of living double lives. And how, you feel different and then ultimately you just figure out a way to cope in the world. You honor both of your cultures by being the school you, the work you, the Western American culture society you, and then at temple you are kind of like the Hare Krishna, Kirtan, spiritual devotee you. And that is how you cope with it. And I think even into adulthood, many people just kind of like function that way in the world. And I guess I just wanted to ask you, like, do you feel like you live two different lives still? Like you've had this difference moment? Is that how you also feel like you've coped?
Yeah, I think for some time, for sure, that was the case. I'd say today I feel much more integrated. So fast forward 28 years later from that Camp Bernie, I sat down with my new boss and had lunch together and talked about my dietary preferences and standards and to specifics, and even shared pieces of my faith and spirituality in that conversation. That was so relieving to be able to do that. I didn't feel like I had to keep those two worlds separate. But I would say that, yeah, even though I do feel more integrated, but still I'm quite thoughtful about what I say where, especially like online.
Yeah.
So what about you? I wanted to specifically ask because recently you had a really interesting opportunity.
Yeah.
There's an app called Skylight that is interested in educating and encouraging, especially Gen Z, in the ideas of spirituality. You had this great opportunity come up where you could represent Hinduism, but do you still feel like that double life, or how did it feel to even do this, being on video and having to answer these questions about your faith and then it being published on this app and on the internet and on YouTube and basically having your face and name like as a face of Hinduism? I mean, if there's anything that's like,
okay, I'm not publicly... the face of Hinduism. All right, relax. Yeah, I mean, it was surreal. And I didn't anticipate it actually to be such a deep experience for me. I think college was the time where I really realized, whoa, you are living a double life, girl. I didn't even know that I was living a double life. Like, I made this decision and look at you. At school, you're Gopika. At temple, you're Gopi. And, you're rocking it at temple and you're rocking it at school and everything is fine. Mm-hmm. And, of course, when I got to college, I really experienced this huge crisis because in these two worlds, who was I?
Can you share the moment when that happened?
Yeah, it was actually at a Bhakti Club meeting where I attended, and I'm pretty sure it was you who handed me a pair of kartals, and like my insides froze in that moment. I can still remember it viscerally because...
Just with playing kartals?
I know, right? No, but I think that just goes to show how deep this type of thing can go, When you have unresolved tension and trauma around things that mean a lot to you, it will show up in your life. Maybe at times you don't expect it. That moment, I realized like, wow, I really don't know who I am and I don't know what I want to believe in. At that point in college was this turning point of accepting that I had this crisis and I needed to explore it. And then spending those years wrestling, with the philosophy, asking the hard questions. And then, of course, our work at Bhakti Club was powerful in that when we had to share our faith, it forced us to learn about it in a way that actually made sense so we could explain it from a real place. That led us to continue our work in terms of really sharing Bhakti in a way that was relevant, impactful, deepening our own knowledge. And so, of course, when this Utah opportunity comes along, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, like, this is great. I prepared and I felt like the last decade of my life was almost preparation for this. When I got there, and I actually started filming, I was so nervous. But when I started talking and I was being heard by these people who were genuinely interested and curious, and I also felt like they were understanding what I was saying, which meant like I was successful in communicating my faith in a way that was clear and authentic and relatable. I felt healed on the inside. I felt in that moment, difference is my superpower.
Yeah.
Versus when I was a little kid, difference is my dagger.
Yeah. Oof. Wow. So there's one thing of like, let me just copy and paste what was said before. There's let me say it in a way that's relatable. And then there's a way that let me say it in a way that's real and relatable. And I felt that what was beautiful was that you spoke from that place.
Yeah, but I feel like I can't take credit for that because I had so much help even in preparing for this from the wonderful Venkatabhatta Prabhu. So shout out to him if he's listening to this episode. But also to all those mentors who helped us process our life in the last decade. Because I believe one of the questions was, what role does the faith play in your life?
Yeah.
Right? Or what role does God play in your life? For me, that answer came from getting help from other people when I was going through something and I was challenged to find God, to hang on to my principles. And I had help from so many wonderful counselors, mentors, friends to connect me to our values and to Krishna during that time, which then allowed me to then speak from that place from reality. Because we had to walk through certain parts of life, wrestle to find Krishna, and then find him in those moments. So that's like one aspect is like processing our life with regards to Krishna consciousness. And then the other aspect has been learning from all these amazing teachers the essence of our philosophy in a way that makes sense for me and for my brain and is not just devotee lingo. Just even the impact of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When we hear about him, we generally hear that he is Radha and Krishna incarnate and the golden avatar. We can rattle off 20 facts about him. But when I heard Chaitanya Charan Prabhu talking about him in terms of the societal impact he had with regards to how he revolutionized how people were experiencing God and the vast inequality that was existing in India with the caste system, and how Mahaprabhu came and said, no, everybody has a right to have a relationship with God. Like, that made me feel connected to Mahaprabhu. More than any other little Nimai pastime I learned as a child growing up. And so I think it's like learning from people who have been explaining bhakti in a way that made sense for me, that inspired me, that felt very real to my world, to help build my muscle in terms of what are these values, what are these philosophical points that we believe in, why do I believe in it, actually believe in it. Like, I can stand behind it on a camera and say, yes, I believe in this wholeheartedly.
It sounds like it's not just about being able to articulate some points or philosophy, but how it adds value to one's life today.
Yeah.
Right. And that sounds kind of so simple when you say it like that. But going back to this point of difference, right?
Yeah.
Difference feels like a disadvantage. But the way that difference turns into an advantage or a superpower or something that actually gives you an edge is when you can see how it's adding value to the way that you navigate life today.
Exactly.
It genuinely is a muscle.
Yes, it's a muscle.
And the muscle has to be trained and it has to become reflexive, but over time with practice. So some people might be watching you and thinking, wow, like she's just really good at speaking, but it's practice over many years. It's personal experience, and it's really developing the muscle of the lens of how you look at bhakti.
Yeah, I was going to say it's making sense of it for me in a very deep and real way.
Yeah.
And that's been fundamentally transformational for me, and really genuinely feeling in love with our faith. Not just feeling obligated to practice it, not feeling like I have to, or it's my culture that I grew up in, so I do feel some sort of superficial connection, but like genuinely falling in love with it. Because even our fundamental principles, like if you dive deep into our fundamental basics, so we talked about Lord Chaitanya, but let's just even talk about this belief of the soul, that everybody is a spark of divinity and that God's presence is in everybody. If you think about that deeply, how profoundly could it change how you live in the world and interact with others and experience others? Yeah. Like if we genuinely see the soul in other people and Krishna in other people, how motivated might we feel to come from places of love and kindness and compassion? Every aspect of the Bhakti faith, you can dive deeply and find some sort of gem that you can carry with you in life to make you rich. Now that we're parents, we're kind of like reflecting on our own journeys here with this difference moment and having double lives and becoming integrated, or, still working on becoming integrated, honestly. I still have my moments. But what lessons do you feel like we can take as parents to support our children in their respective journeys? They're obviously going to go through this. They will have their difference moment. They will have their challenges. So knowing what we know about what they might experience, given we experienced it, what do you feel like we can do?
Well, I think the most powerful thing that we can do, I've been thinking about a lot recently, is just being an example ourselves of how we are experiencing our faith and how we're sharing it if we have to share it with others. Recently, we went to New Vrindavan for a retreat. When we came back from that, I think our son mentioned something at school. I remember when I picked him up, I told them that, hey, we went to a place called New Vrindavan. I used the word, and that like a spiritual community and a retreat center, and they have cows there. I could see myself 10 years ago, like trying to avoid getting into the specifics.
Or being like, oh, we went to a farm.
Yeah. I just realized at the end of the day, if I feel a certain nervousness about what I'm sharing, then that will transfer to our kids. And so it's kind of a opportunity, now to say, can I take what I've learned for the past 20 years and apply it as a parent? And in places where maybe I still feel a little discomfort, maybe this gives me the impetus to take that risk, to be vulnerable.
Yeah. What I wrote down here is knowing that our children are going through this journey and that they're going to feel some discomfort along the way, keeping a pulse on that journey and being proactive in terms of opening the door constantly to have conversations around it. So, I know I never shared my discomfort with my parents. And if I did once, it was just like, no, you should be proud of it. But like, it kind of like stopped there, which is fine. I'm glad that they were proud of who they were. I think that's also important. But just in general, like being very proactive and hands-on and eyes on that spiritual journey, that identity journey that is happening. Not just thinking that, they're going to figure it out. They'll learn something here and there. Make sure they have good sangha. Of course, all that is important. But I think just our role as parents in being so intimately close to their development, really being part of that. So if we suspect a difference moment, attempting to have a conversation, and maybe it's not a big thing. And in some parenting educators world, I think this particular parenting educator is about how like you can have conversations about difficult things like reproduction with your little children. But I liked her concept. She calls it having drip conversations. That sometimes it's not about having these big sit down talks with your kids, but it's just like a little thing here and there, planting a seed, drip. So, for example, like with our neighbor, of course, our son is 3. I don't know if I drip, if it's going to fall out of his ear or if it's actually going in, right? I don't know. But when we were walking home and he had mentioned this thing about temple rooms, just mentioning like, isn't that interesting that Miss Allie doesn't have a temple room in her house and she lives life differently than we do. And yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Everybody chooses to live their life a little differently.
Yeah.
And he didn't really ask much more about it. So, okay, I leave it there. But drip.
Yeah.
You know?
Can I share another story? This is very briefly. Just today, our son had to take a family photo to school. I was first kind of like trying to figure out what kind of picture should I even print for him. Should it be a picture of us wearing Indian clothes, wearing like tilak and all that? The one that I ended up choosing was a family selfie that we took on Raksha Bandhan. I talked to him about it before he went to school and just kind of role played what kinds of things people could ask him, So I pretended to be like the teacher or whatever, and I'm like, "You sure? This is such a nice photo. You're wearing such a nice thing. What is it that you're wearing?" And oh, it's such a cool color. Like, so what were you doing here?
But again, I feel like it's being proactive, right? Because it was anticipating, hey, there might be a moment that the discomfort might feel too much for our 3-year-old. So how can I just make it an appropriate challenge rather than make him feel out of his depths that he's so different, right? So like that's it. It's like not that we want to shelter our kids completely or that we want to throw them out into the deep, dark, cold world and let them fend for themselves and figure out how to do it, right? But keeping tabs on your child and figuring out how can we give them just the right amount of support that yes, they can go out into the world. They still might feel that discomfort, but they know they have that secure grounding at home, that secure space at home to have these conversations. I love that you did that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we got to chat about this.
Yeah.
And if you're listening, we would love to hear from you about your experience and how you experience your faith. And if you ever had a difference moment and what you're trying to do with your children, there's so many amazing parents out there. We want to learn from you too. So please do reach out, message us. We love to hear your thoughts always.
And if you're interested, please check out Gopika's videos on the Skylight app, also on their website.
If these videos can be of service to you in any way, please use them in whatever capacity you feel like you want to. But yes, thanks for listening. Can't believe it's only 10 o'clock. Yeah. I think Krishna's on our side. We recorded this whole podcast baby-free. Saved by the baby. With that, everybody, good night.
Good night.
Hare Krishna. See you on the next episode.